When you consider the current paradigm of how the universe works, there are many topics that on the surface seem interesting and based on solid fact. These include concepts like wormholes, warp drives, portals, and time machines. Though these may be of interest at a surface level, the reality is that behind these romanticized and well-accepted mechanisms for how to get around the universe lies an uncomfortable truth. That not only are they almost certainly not real, but they are the result of a current paradigm of physics that is largely one of defeatism, both in terms of the universe's ultimate fate and our ability to ever hope of exploring it or expanding outwards within it. Two main points of this physics of defeat, as I call it, are the universe's supposed expansion and the ultimate speed limit of light. Here, the universe is seen as not only expanding away from us, but doing so at an accelerating rate the further out one travels. And thus, coupled with the universal speed limit of light, it makes getting anywhere within it a rather hopeless exercise with normal physics. This then leads to mathematical workarounds with hypothetical mechanisms, such as the previously mentioned wormholes, warp drives, or portals, among others. However, even if these mechanisms are to be believed, their time frame for actually being engineered is seen to be centuries in the future, if ever. Also, in this far-off future, even if one were to brave the journey, time dilation and aging effects are supposed to exist, threatening to ruin the whole situation and create the prospect of returning home to no home at all, or to loved ones that have long since passed away. And in addition to these major pieces of the current paradigm of defeat, there's also the concept of black holes, which threaten to swallow everything, never to return. The whole paradigm thus pointing to a lack of permanence in the universe, as objects within it should either expand away from themselves forever while being swallowed locally by black holes, and or collapse back into a singularity to have everything be erased and refreshed anew. And thus, what even is the point of trying to see what's out there, one could conclude. I'll bet some of you have at least briefly acknowledged the non-ideal nature of the current picture, even if only in passing. Haven't you, as a fan of space exploration, ever had the epiphany that not only are these concepts flimsy and more mathematical than physical, but that their supposed time frame of being able to be engineered far beyond your own lifetime? Coupled with the universe's ultimate supposed fate of doom, what even is the point then of looking towards the stars or learning about something that we could never even reach? But even if you've had that thought, you'd be unlikely to be able to do much about it. As if you tried, there's the barrier of the math involved in these topics to even hope of refuting them. And so I believe that's a big reason why the current paradigm has endured for so long, despite it being so hopeless in general and far off into the future. But what if this paradigm was actually completely wrong? What if instead it was based on a few key interpretations of reality to underpin the entire thing, and that those interpretations are actually fairly easily disproved? That's what I believe to be the case, and I outline why that's my belief, and what's the true nature of reality in my book called Hyperluminal Physics. In it, I discuss the possible missteps that led to the current picture, and the truth as I believe it to exist, that's not only way cooler, but more practical in terms of being able to be engineered, and something that can actually exist within our lifetimes. Would that be exciting to you? Would you be glad to leave behind fantasy mechanisms embedded in math you'll never understand, and that you never see in your lifetime anyway? I bet you would actually, and I would as well. I got into physics when I was young and was never afraid of the math, but somewhere along the way the tangibility of it all was lacking, and so I turned instead to space science. However, despite doing so, the current paradigm just seemed to inform everything from not only how science was funded, but also to timelines for when we were expected to ever be able to do anything out there in the universe. And so it seemed that it was inevitable that this paradigm had to be confronted. Was it truly the ultimate truth, and my career in these fields relegated to near-Earth orbital operations until the fantasy mechanisms could finally be engineered hundreds of years in the future? Or could I make the case for a new reality and free myself and others from these misconceptions? I set out thus with the hope that the current paradigm was in fact wrong. But since I'm a scientist, if indeed it was correct, I would definitely have to admit that as well. But thankfully, after doing the research, in my opinion, it's most certainly not correct. And so this channel will be dedicated to going through some of these various pieces of the physics of defeat and showing why they are in fact wrong, and then motivating cool new concepts that I believe are true and with which we can actually get out there in the universe in fairly short order. Perhaps the biggest piece of the physics of defeat is the universal speed limit of light. Even with the universe expanding and black holes, etc., if travel speed is limited, it starts to point things more in the direction of the warp drives, wormholes, and cryosleep systems, rather than just going fast and getting where we want to go. This speed limit arises out of relativity theory, which underpins much of modern physics, and whose assumptions lead to an equation of how time scales in inertial frames that is its equation for time dilation. This is the gamma factor of special relativity, which as you can see goes to infinity as velocity goes to the speed of light. This gamma factor extends throughout the whole theory, as quantities such as velocity are taken with respect to what's called proper time. There, via the chain rule of differentiation, the gamma factor gets into the velocity, essentially from the time dilation formula, which then gets into the energy and gives rise to an energy equation which also goes towards infinity as velocity approaches the speed of light. This then leads to the statement that we can't reach or exceed the speed of light because it would require infinite energy. But no, that's merely a circular argument and comes from an energy equation that was based on those sorts of assumptions to begin with, and not on anything truly fundamental. Nor was the statement of supposed infinite energy actually based on observation, as certain types of particles are in fact observed to exceed the speed of light. And so it's imperative to examine the foundations of relativity theory as really one of, if not the main linchpin of the entire current paradigm. And I'll do that in the first real video for this channel. But for now, I'll just end by saying that the new field of hyperluminal physics, in addition to replacing relativity theory as the truer description for high energy motion, and thus unlocking travel at extremely high speeds, also gives rise to new results on time and length changes as perceived by an observer. Interesting solutions in terms of high-speed navigation with stars or other means, including using hyperluminal communication along with travel, to a new description of how gravity works, and why gravity is in fact a hyperluminal force, as Newton had originally envisioned. And then, finally, I asked the question about what other parts of physics can change when allowing for hyperspeed motion. I think you'll be surprised and excited about what results from all of that analysis. So join me for the answers to these questions and an introduction to the exciting new field of hyperluminal physics. Thanks for watching.